there is a moment when the day no longer needs to be carried. Not because everything has been resolved, and not because every thought has found an answer, but because the body and mind reach a natural point of pause. This moment does not require effort. It does not arrive through concentration or intention. It appears quietly, often when nothing more is being asked of you. Right now can be that moment. Nothing needs to change for rest to begin. The body does not need to be prepared in any special way. The mind does not need to become empty or calm first. Whatever is present is allowed to be present. Whatever is unfinished can remain unfinished. Rest does not depend on perfection or readiness. It simply begins when resistance eases. There is a subtle difference between trying to relax and allowing relaxation to happen. Trying carries weight. Allowing feels lighter. Allowing has no direction and no goal. It is simply a soft permission for things to settle in their own time. As awareness rests here, it may notice the quiet fact that the body already knows how to rest. This knowledge is older than language, older than thought. Every night, without instruction, the body transitions through layers of slowing, releasing, and restoring. This process does not need supervision. It does not need encouragement. It unfolds automatically when the conditions are gentle enough. The conditions are gentle now. Gravity continues doing what it has always done, holding the body without effort, surfaces support without asking anything in return. The environment, whatever it may be, does not require attention. Even sounds can exist without meaning, without importance, without interruption. The mind may still be active, thoughts may still appear. That is not a problem to solve. Thoughts are not obstacles to rest. They are simply movements that lose momentum when they are no longer followed. Like footsteps fading down a long hallway, they grow quieter when no one listens for them. There is nothing to monitor here, no state to reach, no progress to measure. Rest is not a destination. It is a release of striving. It begins when the system senses that it is safe to stop holding itself together. Safety does not need to be created. It does not need to be imagined or reinforced. It is often already present, unnoticed beneath layers of habit and alertness. As attention softens, that quiet baseline becomes easier to sense, a neutral, steady background where nothing is demanded. The body does not ask for instructions. It responds to permission. Permission can feel like nothing at all, a subtle easing, a reduction in effort, a willingness to let sensations be as they are without labeling them or improving them. Warmth, coolness, heaviness, lightness, none of these require interpretation. Even awareness itself can begin to rest. There may be moments when attention drifts and returns, moments when the voice fades into the background and then becomes noticeable again. These fluctuations are signs of settling, not disruption. The system naturally oscillates as it moves toward deeper rest. There is no need to stay with every word. meaning of the words is unimportant. Their presence can simply blend into the environment, like distant sounds that neither demand nor repel attention. Here, rest is not something you do. It is something that happens when doing stops. The day loosens its grip. The next moment does not need to be anticipated. The previous moment does not need to be reviewed. Awareness can float without direction, without responsibility, without identity. This is arriving without effort, arriving without expectation, arriving exactly as you are. And from here, the body continues on its own, moving naturally towards stillness, softness, and sleep, without needing help, without needing permission, without needing to be noticed at all. There is a quiet intelligence in the way the body meets support. It happens without thought, without instruction. Wherever the body is resting now, it is already being held. The weight of muscles, bones, and breath is distributed naturally, responding to contact points without effort. This exchange between body and surface has been happening since the moment you stopped moving. Nothing needs to be adjusted. The body is allowed to be heavy. It is allowed to take up space. It is allowed to settle unevenly, imperfectly, comfortably in its own way. Support does not require symmetry or stillness. It simply responds. As awareness drifts here, it may notice places where the body meets what is beneath it. These sensations do not need to be examined closely. They can be sensed vaguely, as a general impression rather than a detailed map. The mind does not need to catalog or analyze. A loose noticing is enough. Gravity continues quietly, steadily, doing the work of holding you down so you do not have to hold yourself together. There is a subtle relief in realizing this. So much effort during the day is spent resisting gravity, standing, sitting upright, staying alert, staying ready. Now that resistance is no longer necessary. The body can give in to the downward pull, not collapsing, not sinking away, but resting fully into what supports it. This resting is not passive or empty. It is an active exchange of pressure and release, balance and surrender, happening automatically at a level beneath awareness. Muscles make tiny adjustments and then let go. Tension drains away without needing to be directed. Breathing continues on its own, responding to the space available, responding to the absence of urgency. There is no need to notice the breath closely. It will find its own rhythm when left alone. The surface beneath you does not judge. It does not ask whether you are doing this correctly. It does not care how the day went or what tomorrow holds. It simply supports, consistently, neutrally, without condition. The body recognizes this kind of reliability. As that recognition spreads, there may be a growing sense of being contained, not trapped, not restricted, contained in the way water is contained by a calm shoreline, held without pressure, supported without demand. Even areas that usually stay alert, the lower back, the abdomen, the chest, may begin to soften in response to this steady holding. This softening does not need to be encouraged. It happens naturally when the body senses that it does not need to brace or protect. If thoughts arise, they can float through this space without interfering. The body does not require mental silence in order to rest. It only requires the absence of interference. Attention itself can begin to lean into support. Rather than hovering, monitoring, or directing, awareness can rest lightly on the sensation of being held, not focusing, not concentrating, simply allowing that background sense to exist. Even this may fade in and out, and that is fine. There may be moments when awareness drifts completely, when words lose clarity, when the sense of body becomes vague or distant. These are not lapses. They are signs that the system is moving deeper into rest. Nothing is being lost. Control is being returned. The body knows how to settle when it is allowed to be supported fully. It does not need reminders. It does not need reassurance. The evidence of support is already present, quietly, consistently, beneath you. As effort continues to dissolve, the boundary between body and surface may feel less distinct. Where you end and where support begins becomes less important. The distinction does not need to be maintained. Here, being held is enough. There is nowhere to go, nothing to maintain, nothing to keep track of. The body rests into support. The mind no longer needs to stand guard. And as this exchange continues, gravity holding, surfaces supporting, effort releasing, the system naturally prepares itself for deeper quiet, without direction, without intention, without needing to be noticed at all. There is a natural rhythm to the nervous system that does not need to be managed. Throughout the day, it adapts to demands, speeds up, sharpens awareness, and prepares the body for action. This is not a mistake or a flaw. It is simply how the system responds to stimulation. And just as naturally, when stimulation fades, the system begins to slow again. This slowing does not require instruction. It begins quietly, often before it is noticed. Signals shift beneath awareness. Muscles reduce their readiness. Sensory input becomes less urgent. Internal rhythms begin to lengthen. The body recognizes when it is no longer necessary to stay alert. Right now, there is nothing asking for immediate response. The nervous system senses this absence of demand. It listens not to words, but to conditions. Stillness, low stimulation, predictability, support. These are the signals it understands best. As these signals continue, the system gradually moves away from readiness and toward restoration. There is no switch to flip, no moment where slowing must begin. It unfolds gradually, like dusk replacing daylight, not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily and without resistance. Awareness does not need to follow this process closely. It can remain broad, unfocused, uninterested in details. The nervous system does not require supervision. In fact, it slows more easily when it is left alone. Trying to relax can sometimes keep the system alert. Letting go allows it to settle. Letting go does not mean forcing anything away. It means removing the need to control what is already happening. Sensations can come and go. Thoughts can appear and fade. None of this interrupts the deeper process unfolding beneath. The body begins to favor slower rhythms. Heart rate eases without needing attention. Muscles reduce unnecessary tension. Internal pressure softens. These shifts are subtle but cumulative. Each small adjustment signals safety, and safety invites further slowing. Even if the mind is not convinced, the body responds first. The nervous system does not need belief. It responds to environment, posture, and the absence of urgency. And in this moment, urgency is not required. There is nowhere to be, nothing to prepare for, nothing to respond to. This absence of demand is one of the strongest signals the body can receive. As it continues, the system begins to conserve energy rather than expend it. Awareness becomes less sharp, less pointed. Sensory input loses intensity. Sounds become flatter, less meaningful. Internal sensations blur together rather than standing out. This is not dullness. It is efficiency. The nervous system is choosing rest because rest is appropriate now. Attention may notice moments of drifting, brief gaps, where nothing is clearly perceived, where words fade and then return. These gaps are not something to hold onto or avoid. They are signs that the system is transitioning smoothly. There is no need to stay awake for this. The body will continue to slow, whether or not awareness follows, even if the mind wanders. Even if thoughts briefly gather momentum, the underlying direction remains the same. Downward, inward, quieter. The nervous system releases its grip gradually, layer by layer. Protective readiness gives way to baseline calm. Alertness becomes optional rather than mandatory. Here, nothing is taken away. Only excess effort is released, and as the system continues responding to stillness, support, and predictability, it moves closer to the state it enters every night, not because it is told to, but because it knows when it is safe to rest. That knowing does not need to be conscious. It is already happening. The outside world does not need to disappear for rest to deepen. It only needs to become less relevant. Sounds may still be present, distant traffic, subtle movement, a hum or a rhythm in the background. These sounds do not require interpretation. They do not need to be identified, followed, or filtered out. They can exist as neutral textures, part of the environment, carrying no message. The mind often treats sound as a signal. During the day, every noise might mean something: information, interruption, or demand. But as the system settles, that habit begins to loosen. Sounds no longer require response. They no longer pull attention outward. They simply arrive, exist briefly, and pass. Vision, too, becomes less active. even with eyes closed, the mind sometimes continues to generate images or patterns. These visuals can soften now. Sharp edges blur, contrast fades, darkness becomes less defined, more spacious, less like an absence, and more like a resting place. There is no need to observe this carefully. Even noticing it vaguely is enough. As the senses quiet, the boundary between inside and outside begins to feel less important. Attention no longer scans the environment. It no longer needs to confirm what is happening beyond the body. The world continues without supervision. This release is subtle. It does not feel like withdrawal or isolation. It feels like unhooking. The senses remain available, but they no longer dominate awareness. External input loses priority, making room for internal stillness. Thoughts may still comment on sounds or sensations for a while. That commentary can fade naturally when it is no longer useful. The mind stops narrating when there is nothing to narrate. Nothing needs to be checked. The outside world can take care of itself. As attention drifts inward, it may begin to rest more on internal quiet than external input. This does not require effort. It happens automatically when stimulation lowers. The mind follows the path of least resistance, and quiet requires less energy than alertness. There is relief in this. No need to stay oriented. No need to remain aware of surroundings. No need to be ready. Even the sense of time can begin to soften. Moments stretch or compress. The distinction between now and later loses clarity. Time becomes less structured, less linear, less relevant. This is not confusion. It is disengagement. The system recognizes that tracking time is unnecessary in this state. Without schedules or expectations, the mind releases its grip on sequence and duration. Awareness becomes less pointed. Instead of focusing outward, it diffuses gently, like light spreading in a dim room. There is no center that needs to be maintained, no object that requires attention, no thought that needs to be completed. The outside world fades, not because it is pushed away, but because it no longer asks for participation. If attention briefly returns to a sound or a sensation, it can drift away again just as easily. Nothing pulls it back forcefully. Nothing holds it in place. This ebb and flow is natural. As external relevance continues to dissolve, the body and mind are left with fewer signals to process. With less to do, the system continues to slow. Effort drops further. Awareness becomes lighter, less defined. Here, rest deepens on its own. There is no transition to notice, no boundary to cross, no moment to mark. The outside world remains where it is, stable, distant, unimportant, while the inner world becomes quieter, softer, and less structured. And as this separation continues, gentle, unforced, automatic, the conditions for sleep strengthen, without announcement, without instruction, without needing to be acknowledged at all. The face is often the last place effort lets go. Throughout the day, small muscles around the eyes, jaw, and mouth remain subtly engaged, holding expressions, preparing responses, maintaining alertness. This activity is so familiar that it often goes unnoticed, but when the system begins to rest, these muscles no longer need to stay involved. They can soften without instruction. There is no need to change expression, no need to relax deliberately. Even the idea of relaxation can fade. The face responds naturally when attention stops checking it. The eyes, even when closed, may still be working, tracking faint light, forming images, reacting to thought. As rest deepens, that activity slows. The eyes can settle back into their sockets, heavy and still, no longer scanning or reacting. Vision turns inward and then becomes vague. The muscles around the eyes loosen in tiny increments, not all at once, not dramatically, just enough that effort is no longer required. The forehead smooths in its own time. The space between the brows becomes less defined. The jaw, too, carries more than it needs to. During the day, it holds readiness, words unspoken, reactions delayed, decisions postponed. At rest, that readiness is unnecessary. The jaw does not need to support thought. It does not need to stay prepared. It can simply hang in its natural position. The teeth do not need to touch. The tongue does not need to press or hold. Even the inside of the mouth can feel spacious, neutral, unoccupied. This release does not need to be noticed directly. It often happens best when it is not observed too closely. The body releases more easily when it is not being watched. Breathing adjusts subtly in response. As the face softens, breath flows with less resistance. Not deeper, not slower by instruction, just smoother, quieter, less shaped by effort. The system finds a rhythm that matches its decreasing need for oxygen. The cheeks grow heavy. The lips rest without tension. The area around the ears and temples loosens, allowing warmth to spread gently. There is no requirement to hold the head upright anymore. The head is supported. The neck does its job quietly. The face no longer needs to signal anything to the world. Expression becomes unnecessary. Communication pauses. This is a private state. The mind often associates facial tension with awareness, as if staying slightly engaged keeps consciousness anchored. As that tension dissolves, awareness can drift more freely, less tethered to physical alertness. Thoughts lose sharpness. Images blur. Inner dialogue softens or becomes fragmentary. Even the sense of having a face can become less clear, less important. The body map simplifies as attention withdraws from detail. If a thought passes through about how relaxed you are or not relaxed enough, it can fade without response. Evaluation has no role here. There is no correct level of softness. The face releases what it is ready to release. No more, no less. And that is enough. As this area continues to settle, the rest of the body receives the signal. Facial release communicates safety to to the nervous system more effectively than conscious intention ever could. Safety spreads quietly. The system recognizes that vigilance is no longer needed. There is no one to look at, nothing to speak, nothing to react to. The face rests, and as it does, awareness becomes lighter, less defined, less anchored to form, preparing the way for deeper unwinding, without effort, without direction, without needing to be noticed at all. The neck and shoulders often carry what the rest of the body no longer needs. Throughout the day, they help hold the head upright, maintain posture, and prepare for movement. They respond instantly to stress, anticipation, and concentration, tightening almost without awareness. Over time, this tension becomes familiar, blending into the background as if it were part of the body's natural state, but it is not permanent. When the need for alertness fades, these areas can begin to remember ease. There is no instruction required for this to happen, no need to roll, stretch, or adjust. The neck and shoulders respond best when they are not managed. They release gradually when they sense that they no longer need to protect or support. Right now, the head is already held. It does not need help staying in place. The surface beneath you, the alignment of the body, and gravity itself are doing that work. The muscles of the neck can begin to trust this support, allowing effort to decrease in small, almost imperceptible steps. As effort lessens, the shoulders no longer need to hover. They can drop slightly, not in a dramatic way, but just enough to signal that readiness is no longer required. The feeling is not collapse. It is relief, a quiet recognition that holding is unnecessary. This recognition spreads slowly. Muscles that have been working continuously begin to stand down. They do not all release at once. Some soften before others. Some hold a little longer. There is no need to notice which ones change first. The order does not matter. What matters is the absence of demand. Without demand, the body chooses efficiency. It releases what is not needed. It conserves energy. It shifts toward restoration rather than readiness. The neck lengthens subtly as tension dissolves. The space between the head and shoulders feels less compressed. The spine does not need to be adjusted. It organizes itself naturally when effort decreases. Breath responds again. As the shoulders soften, breathing encounters less resistance. The upper chest no longer needs to assist. The breath becomes quieter, lower, less noticeable. There is no intention here, only response. Warmth may spread through the shoulders, down the arms, or across the upper back. Or there may be no clear sensation at all. Both are signs of settling. Sensation is not required for release to occur. The nervous system reads this change clearly. Neck and shoulder tension is closely linked to vigilance. When these muscles relax, the signal of safety becomes stronger. The system understands that it no longer needs to scan, brace, or prepare. Awareness follows this signal. Thoughts slow further. Attention becomes less fixed. The sense of having to stay present loosens. There is less effort holding consciousness in place. If attention drifts away from these sensations entirely, that is not a loss. It is a continuation. The body does not need awareness to complete this process. Even if the mind briefly returns to activity, the direction remains unchanged. Downward, quieter, easier, the shoulders continue to settle, finding their natural resting position. The neck supports only what is necessary, nothing more. Here, effort drains away without being pushed. Release happens without being named. And as this area continues to soften, the body prepares itself for deeper stillness, guided not by intention, but by its own quiet intelligence. The arms and hands spend much of the day in readiness. They reach, hold, type, grip, adjust, and respond. Even at rest, there is often a subtle charge running through them, a preparedness to move, to react, to do. This quiet activation can remain long after activity has stopped, lingering as background tension. As the system settles, that readiness is no longer required. The arms do not need to support anything now. They do not need to brace, lift, or signal. Whatever position they are in is already sufficient. There is no correct placement. Comfort does not depend on symmetry or alignment. When the nervous system recognizes this lack of demand, the arms begin to return to stillness. Muscles that were maintaining tone for action can soften, not abruptly, not all at once, just enough to reduce effort. Weight transfers downward toward support as the arms allow themselves to be heavy. This heaviness is not pressure. It is permission. The shoulders have already begun to let go, and that release travels naturally down through the upper arms, elbows, forearms, and into the hands. There is no need to follow this progression. It unfolds on its own, guided by gravity and the absence of intention. The hands, in particular, carry a surprising amount of tension. They are precise instruments during the day, constantly ready to manipulate and respond. At rest, they no longer need that precision. Fingers do not need to hold shape. They do not need to curl or extend deliberately. They can rest however they fall. The palms may feel warm or cool or neutral. Sensation may be clear or it may fade altogether. There is no preferred experience. Release does not announce itself with sensation every time. Sometimes it is noticed only afterward, when effort is gone. The wrists soften. The fingers separate slightly or rest together without intention. The small muscles of the hands stand down, relieved of their constant engagement. Breath and circulation adjust quietly. As muscular effort decreases, blood flow redistributes naturally. There is no need to notice this. The body handles it automatically, as it always does when shifting into rest. Awareness may briefly touch these areas and then drift away. There is no need to maintain focus. The arms and hands do not require attention to continue releasing. even if a stray thought passes through about posture, comfort, or sensation, it can dissolve without response. Evaluation is unnecessary. The body does not need approval to rest. As the arms become still, the sense of boundaries begins to soften. Where the body ends and support becomes less distinct. The arms may feel distant, vague, or partially absent. This is not numbness. It is de-emphasis. The brain allocates less attention to areas that no longer require control. This simplification conserves energy. It supports the transition toward sleep. The hands no longer need to be tools. The arms no longer need to be ready. They can exist quietly, weight supported, effort released, and as this quiet spreads, awareness becomes less anchored to form and function. The mind no longer needs to track limbs or posture. There is less to manage, less to hold together. The system continues to settle layer by layer, not because it is instructed to, but because nothing is asking it to do otherwise. Rest deepens naturally. The chest and upper back often reflect how much the body has been holding during the day. These areas stay subtly active, supporting posture, accommodating breath, responding to emotion, and maintaining readiness. Even when movement stops, this region can remain quietly engaged, as if waiting for the next demand. As rest deepens, that waiting is no longer necessary. The chest does not need to stay open or controlled. The upper back does not need to stay alert or upright. There is no posture to maintain now. The body is supported, and support replaces effort. Breathing continues without instruction. The rise and fall of the chest no longer needs to be managed or shaped. Breath adjusts naturally when the surrounding muscles soften. There is no need for depth, rhythm, or awareness. The body finds the pace that matches its decreasing need for energy. As the chest softens, internal pressure eases. The ribs can move freely, without resistance. The space inside the chest feels less guarded, less compressed. This openness is not created. It emerges when tension withdraws. The upper back follows. Muscles between the shoulder blades, often engaged for stability and alertness, can begin to release. The spine does not collapse. It organizes itself naturally when excess effort is removed. Support from beneath allows the back to rest without holding. This release may be felt as warmth, spreading outward or downward, or it may not be felt at all. Sensation is optional. The nervous system does not require feedback to continue settling. The heart area grows quieter, not in function, but in presence. It does not need to respond emotionally. It does not need to anticipate. The steady rhythm continues in the background, unnoticed, unimportant. Emotional residue sometimes gathers here, unspoken reactions, held feelings, unfinished conversations. At rest, these do not need to be addressed. They do not need meaning or resolution. When muscular tension fades, emotional charge often fades with it. The The body does this naturally as the chest and upper back soften. Breathing encounters less resistance. Air moves more quietly. The sound of breath, if noticed at all, becomes faint and neutral. Awareness begins to drift further inward. The sense of the front and back of the body becomes less distinct. The chest no longer stands out as a center of activity. The upper back no longer anchors posture. The body map simplifies again, conserving energy. There is less to manage. Attention does not need to stay here. The release continues whether or not it is noticed. If awareness moves on, the body does not reverse course. It keeps settling. This is the body choosing rest, because nothing is asking it to remain prepared. The chest rests, the upper back rests, and as these areas grow quieter, the system moves closer to stillness, not by instruction, not by effort, but by the natural response to safety, support, and the absence of demand. The transition continues gently, without announcement, without urgency, preparing the way for deeper unwinding that no longer needs words at all. The abdomen and lower back often hold effort quietly, not the visible effort of movement, but the deeper kind, stabilizing the body, supporting posture, bracing against uncertainty, holding in reactions that never found expression. This region works continuously, often without awareness, maintaining readiness even when nothing is required. As rest deepens, that readiness can begin to dissolve. The abdomen does not need to stay firm. It does not need to hold or protect. Digestion, circulation, and internal rhythms continue automatically without supervision. Control is not needed here. When the nervous system senses safety, the abdomen is one of the first places it allows to soften. This softening is not collapse. It is a release of unnecessary holding. The belly is allowed to rise and fall freely with breath, without being shaped or restrained. There is no need to observe the breath. It will move in the way that requires the least effort. The lower back responds next. During the day, it supports balance, posture, and motion. Even at rest, it may remain subtly engaged, as if still standing. As the body recognizes full support beneath it, the lower back can finally let go of that role. Muscles reduce their tone gradually. The spine settles into its natural curves without adjustment. There is no correct alignment to achieve. The body organizes itself when effort is removed. This release can feel like warmth spreading, or like space opening, or it may pass unnoticed. The nervous system does not require sensation to continue letting go. Internal organs shift slightly as tension releases. This is a sign of settling, not something to attend to. Everything finds its place when there is no need to hold it in position. As the abdomen softens, the signal of safety strengthens. The nervous system associates abdominal relaxation with deep rest. When this area is no longer braced, the system understands that vigilance is unnecessary. Energy can be conserved. repair can begin. Thoughts may slow further. The mind often mirrors the state of the body. As core tension releases, mental effort drops with it. Planning, worrying, and reviewing lose momentum. Attention becomes broader, less focused. There is less sense of holding everything together. Awareness may drift in and out. Moments of blankness may appear, brief pauses where nothing is clearly noticed. These are natural transitions, not interruptions. The body continues regardless. The abdomen rests. The lower back rests. There is no need to check on them, no need to return attention here. Release continues without permission or guidance. As this central area settles, the body's center of gravity feels heavier, more grounded. Weight transfers downward into support. Effort drains away from the core. The system moves closer to stillness. Not because it is instructed to, not because it is trying to sleep, but because nothing is asking it to remain awake. And in that absence of demand, rest deepens quietly, steadily, without needing to be noticed at all. The hips, legs, and feet carry the body through the world. They support weight, maintain balance, and respond instantly to movement. Even when still, they often remain subtly engaged, ready to stand, shift, or step. This readiness can linger long after the day has ended. As rest continues to deepen, that readiness is no longer required. The hips do not need to stabilize. The legs do not need to prepare. The feet do not need to feel the ground. Wherever they are now is enough. The body is supported, and support replaces effort. Weight begins to settle downward. The hips grow heavier first, responding to gravity without resistance. Muscles that have been holding alignment soften, allowing the pelvis to rest fully into what supports it. There is no correct position to reach. Comfort does not depend on symmetry or stillness. The thighs follow. Large muscles that worked throughout the day reduce their tone. They release in layers, gradually, as if standing down after a long task. There is no signal to wait for. The absence of demand is enough. The knees do not need to hold or balance. They are allowed to be neutral, neither bent nor straight with intention. Joints find their own resting positions when effort is removed. The calves and lower legs respond next. Muscles that propelled movement, maintained posture, and absorbed impact begin to soften. Circulation adjusts quietly. Warmth may spread downward, or sensation may fade entirely. Both are signs of settling. The feet, finally, are allowed to rest without purpose. They do not need to grip. They do not need to align. They do not need to feel anything in particular. The arches release. The toes rest however they fall. This release often goes unnoticed at first. The brain gradually reduces attention to areas that no longer require control. As the legs and feet become less relevant, awareness shifts elsewhere or becomes diffuse. The sense of having legs may soften. They may feel distant, heavy, or partially absent. This is not numbness. it is de-emphasis. The body map simplifies as the system conserves energy. Breathing remains quiet and unshaped. The lower bodies release signals safety to the nervous system. When the legs no longer prepare to move, the system understands that it does not need to stay alert. This understanding spreads. Thoughts slow further. The urge to shift, adjust, or reposition fades. Stillness becomes easier, not because it is forced, but because movement is unnecessary. There is nothing to support, nothing to push against, nothing to prepare for. The lower body rests completely, and as it does, the entire system moves toward a state where effort is minimal and awareness is light. The groundwork for sleep is already in place. The body has done what it needs to do. From here, rest continues on its own, quiet, unforced, and automatic, without needing to be guided or noticed at all. Thoughts do not need to stop for rest to deepen. They slow naturally when they are no longer useful. During the day, thinking serves a purpose: planning, deciding, responding, solving. At rest, that purpose fades, without tasks to complete or problems to address. Thoughts begin to lose momentum on their own. This slowing does not require effort. Thoughts may still appear, but they arrive differently now. Softer, less urgent, less complete. They resemble passing clouds rather than solid objects. They move through awareness without asking to be followed. There is no need to engage with them. A thought can appear and fade without being finished. Another may begin and dissolve halfway through. Meaning fragments gently. Narratives no longer need conclusions. This is not confusion. It is efficiency. The mind stops investing energy in what no longer matters. Awareness can rest here, noticing the way thoughts come and go without attachment, or it can drift entirely, losing interest in observation itself. Both are signs that mental effort is decreasing. Nothing is being lost. Control is being returned. The brain naturally reduces cognitive activity when stimulation is low and safety is present. This process is automatic. It does not require belief or cooperation. It happens even when the mind doubts it is happening. Thoughts slow because there is nothing they need to do. Some may repeat briefly, like echoes in an empty space. Others may surface and disappear before forming words. Some may never reach clarity at all. These fragments do not need attention. They do not need to be pushed away or resolved. They fade when they are not fed. The spaces between thoughts grow longer. At first, these spaces may be brief, a second or two of quiet before another thought appears. Over time, they lengthen naturally. Silence becomes more familiar. Gaps feel less noticeable, less remarkable. Awareness becomes less pointed. Instead of focusing on individual thoughts, it rests in the background where thoughts arise and dissolve. This background is calm, neutral, and undemanding. There is no need to stay alert for the next thought. There is no need to check whether the mind is quiet enough. The nervous system does not measure progress. If a thought does pull attention briefly, it can pass just as easily. There is no penalty for noticing it. There is no setback. The direction remains the same. Downward, quieter, slower. As mental activity reduces, the body responds in kind. Muscular tone drops further. Breathing becomes even less noticeable. Sensory input loses clarity. The mind and body move together. Eventually, thoughts become more like impressions than sentences. Images blur. Words lose structure. Meaning dissolves into texture. This is not something to hold on to. It is something that happens when effort stops. Awareness itself may begin to drift, not disappearing, but loosening its grip. Moments of blankness may appear, where nothing is clearly perceived. These moments do not need to be noticed or remembered. They are part of the transition. There is no requirement to stay awake for this. The mind slows because the system is resting. The system rests because nothing is being asked of it. And as this continues, thinking becomes optional, awareness becomes diffuse, and the conditions for sleep strengthen quietly. Without instruction, without urgency, without needing to be noticed at all, there is a quiet relief in not needing to understand anything. During the day, the mind is constantly interpreting, making sense of sensations, organizing information, drawing conclusions, deciding what matters. This effort often continues into the night, even when there is nothing left to resolve. As rest deepens, that effort can loosen. Understanding is no longer required. Thoughts do not need to connect. Experiences do not need meaning. Sensations do not need explanation. The mind can rest from interpretation without losing safety or control. Nothing important depends on comprehension right now. Ideas may still appear, but they no longer need to make sense. Fragments of memory, unfinished phrases, vague images may drift through awareness. They do not need to be completed. They do not need to be corrected or organized. They can remain incomplete. The mind often tries to stay active by searching for coherence, linking one thought to the next, building narratives, checking for relevance. As the need for understanding fades, this habit loses its grip. Thoughts become simpler, then less defined, then optional. Awareness no longer needs to follow logic. It no longer needs to track cause and effect. It does not need to know where one moment ends and the next begins. This is not confusion. It is rest. The brain conserves energy when it is no longer required to process meaning. Neural activity shifts away from analysis and toward restoration. This happens automatically when the environment is quiet and the body is supported. Even curiosity can soften. There is no need to wonder what comes next, no need to anticipate sleep or check whether it is happening. Curiosity relaxes when there is nothing it needs to discover. If a thought arises asking, "Am I doing this right?" it can dissolve without response. That question belongs to effort, and effort is no longer necessary. The mind is allowed to be vague. Words may blur. Images may lose edges. Sounds may merge into a single background presence. The distinction between one experience and another becomes less important. Awareness floats without structure. There is no task to stay with, no object to hold, no process to manage. Moments may pass without clear memory. Awareness may fade and return without warning. These shifts are natural signs of disengagement from wakeful processing. Nothing is missing. The system is doing exactly what it needs to do. As the need to understand dissolves, mental effort drops further. The body responds by softening even more deeply. Breathing becomes quieter. Sensory input loses priority. The mind no longer needs to make sense of rest in order to enter it. Rest does not require permission from thought. It arrives when thought steps aside, and as understanding becomes unnecessary, awareness becomes lighter, less defined, and more spacious, drifting gently towards sleep, without direction, without expectation, without needing to be noticed at all. Memory and anticipation are forms of movement. They carry awareness backward into what has already happened, or forward into what has not yet arrived. During the day, this movement is useful. It helps with learning, planning, and preparation. At rest, that movement no longer serves a purpose. As the system settles, memory and anticipation begin to lose urgency. Past events do not need to be reviewed. Future moments do not need to be prepared for. Nothing depends on recall or foresight right now. Memories may still surface, but they arrive without emotional charge. Images, conversations, or impressions may appear briefly and then fade. They do not need to be evaluated or understood. The mind no longer needs to travel. Anticipation, too, softens. Thoughts about tomorrow, about sleep itself, about what comes next, lose their pull. Without deadlines or expectations, the future becomes vague and unimportant. Time stretches and blurs. The distinction between earlier and later weakens. The mind no longer needs to track sequence or duration. Without purpose, timekeeping dissolves naturally. This does not feel like loss. It feels like relief. The nervous system does not need to orient itself when nothing is required. It can remain here without direction, without reference. Memory becomes quieter. Even the sense of personal history can fade slightly. The story of who you are, what happened today, and what might happen next becomes less vivid. Identity softens as attention disengages from narrative. Awareness becomes more present, but not focused. There is no now that needs to be held, no moment that needs to be preserved. Experience becomes fluid, less defined. If a memory or future thought briefly pulls attention, it can drift away again without resistance. There is no need to push it aside. Without reinforcement, it fades on its own. The mind conserves energy by reducing travel. Staying in one place without past or future requires less effort than moving through time. The brain naturally chooses this efficiency when conditions allow. Gaps may appear. Moments where nothing is recalled, nothing is anticipated, nothing is clearly perceived. These gaps do not need to be noticed or remembered. They are signs of deepening rest. The body continues to respond. Muscular tone drops further. Breathing remains quiet and unshaped. Sensory input loses clarity. The system moves as a whole towards stillness. There is no reason to return to memory. There is no reason to look ahead. Everything necessary is already present. As urgency fades from past and future alike, awareness becomes lighter, less burdened, less defined. The mind no longer needs to move through time. It can rest where it is, and in this resting, sleep approaches naturally, without being sought, without being checked for, without needing to be noticed at all. Attention does not need direction to continue settling during waking hours. It is constantly guided toward tasks, thoughts, sensations, and decisions. It moves deliberately, anchoring itself to objects of focus. At rest, that guidance is no longer necessary. Attention can begin to drift, not drifting toward anything in particular, and not away from anything either. It loosens its grip on specific objects and begins to float, light and uncommitted. There is no need to choose where attention goes. When it is not directed, it naturally wanders through softer terrain. Sensations blur. Thoughts lose definition. Awareness becomes more like a field than a point. This wandering is not distraction. It is a reduction in effort. Attention spends energy when it holds something in place. When it releases that effort, energy is conserved. The system recognizes this and allows attention to remain unfocused. There may be moments when attention briefly settles on a sound, a sensation, or a fragment of thought, and then, without instruction, it moves on again. Nothing holds it. Nothing pulls it back. This movement is gentle. It does not feel like jumping or switching. It feels like drifting, slow, continuous, without edges, like a leaf carried by a mild current, changing direction, without resistance. The mind does not need to follow attention. There is no reason to track where it goes or what it touches. Awareness does not need to report back. It can remain diffuse, uninterested in specifics. As this continues, clarity softens. Details become less distinct. Boundaries blur. Experiences overlap slightly, losing their sharp separation. The brain simplifies perception because precision is no longer required. This simplification feels calming. There is less to process, less to manage, less to maintain. Attention may grow quiet for brief stretches, moments where nothing stands out clearly. These are not gaps to be filled. They are resting points. The system does not require continuity of awareness. If attention fades and then returns, it does so without urgency. There is no need to catch up or reorient. Nothing important was missed. Drifting becomes familiar. The sense of effort behind awareness diminishes. consciousness feels lighter, less anchored, less concerned with location or object. Even the sense of paying attention becomes optional. The body responds by settling further. Muscles soften more completely. Breathing becomes nearly imperceptible. Sensory input continues to lose priority. There is no need to stay with this experience. Awareness does not need to stay in the foreground. During waking life, it remains sharp and centered, constantly highlighting what matters. It maintains a sense of presence by staying close to sensation, thought, and perception. At rest, this level of clarity is no longer necessary. Awareness can soften. It does not disappear. It simply recedes, like a light dimming rather than switching off. The edges blur. The center becomes less defined. There is no single point that needs to be maintained. This softening requires no effort. It happens when attention is no longer directed and the mind no longer seeks clarity. Awareness relaxes into the background, becoming more like atmosphere than focus. Perception changes subtly. Sounds lose distinction. Sensations merge. Thoughts, if they appear at all, feel distant and vague. The sense of watching or observing becomes less important. There is no need to stay aware of being aware. That reflex can rest now. The brain naturally reduces the prominence of conscious monitoring when safety is present. Maintaining sharp awareness requires energy. When it is no longer needed, the system chooses a quieter mode. This quieter mode feels spacious, not empty, but wide and unstructured. Experience no longer organizes itself around a central observer. Awareness becomes diffuse, spread out, unlocalized. Moments may pass where nothing is clearly perceived. These moments do not require comment. They do not need to be remembered. Awareness fades and returns gently, without announcement. There is no boundary to cross. The shift from foreground to background happens gradually. One layer of clarity dissolves, then another. The system does not need to be aware of this transition to complete it. If awareness briefly sharpens again, noticing a sound or a thought, it can soften once more just as easily. Nothing holds it in place. The mind no longer needs to supervise experience. Without supervision, processes unfold automatically. Breathing continues. The body remains supported. The nervous system continues its descent into rest. Awareness floats. It is present but unengaged, available but uninterested. There is no effort behind it, no intention guiding it. This state does not need to be stabilized. Trying to maintain it would reintroduce effort, and effort is no longer required. Awareness finds its own level when left alone. As it softens further, the sense of separation between experiences diminishes. Thoughts, sensations, and sounds blend into a single, gentle background. The mind rests in this background. There is nothing to follow, nothing to hold, nothing to watch. Awareness continues quietly, like a low hum, gradually fading into the deeper, unstructured state that precedes sleep, without direction, without expectation, without needing to be invited to rest on whatever emotional tone happens to be present, without identifying it, labeling it, or trying to understand where it came from. There is no need to search for feelings, and no need to push any away. Whatever emotional weight has been carried through the day is allowed to be exactly as it is, for now, without commentary. Sometimes emotions hold themselves in place simply because they have been watched too closely, analyzed too carefully, or carried with a sense of responsibility. In this moment, that responsibility can loosen. Feelings do not need supervision. They do not need correction. They are permitted to shift, soften, or fade on their own timeline. You might notice that when nothing is asked of an emotion, it often begins to change its shape. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but quietly. Like a knot loosening when it is no longer pulled tight, the weight may feel less defined, less concentrated, more spread out, or less solid than before. There is no requirement to name what is releasing. It does not need a story or a conclusion. Emotional energy can unhook itself without explanation. The way a held breath releases when it is no longer noticed. This process does not require effort or intention. It happens naturally when attention becomes gentle and non-demanding. If there is a sense of heaviness, it may begin to feel less personal, less central. If there is a sense of concern or lingering tension, it can be allowed to exist without being carried forward. Nothing here needs to be solved in order to rest. Nothing needs to be resolved to be safe. Often, emotional weight is sustained by the belief that it must be held until something is done about it. For now, that belief can soften. The body and mind know how to set things down temporarily, without losing them, without forgetting them, without harm. Rest is not avoidance. It is a natural state the system returns to when it is allowed. As this unhooking happens, there may be subtle signals of relief, a sense of space, a quieting in the chest or abdomen, a feeling that something is no longer being braced against. These signals do not need to be tracked or deepened. They can come and go freely. Even if no clear change is noticed, that is also fine. Emotional release does not have to be dramatic to be effective. Sometimes the most meaningful shifts happen beneath awareness, outside of conscious perception, where the nervous system recalibrates without announcing it. Here, it is enough to let emotions exist without gripping them, to allow them to pass through awareness without leaving residue, to let the system recognize that it does not need to hold everything together right now. Nothing is being lost. Nothing important is slipping away. What is unhooking is simply excess holding unnecessary tension, the quiet habit of carrying more than is required in this moment. Rest continues to support this process naturally, without instruction, without effort, without attention needing to stay involved. And as emotional weight loosens, the overall internal atmosphere may feel a little more open, a little less crowded, even if only faintly. That faintness is enough. The system understands it. There is nothing more to do here. No need to check whether release is happening correctly. No need to stay alert. Emotional letting go can continue on its own, gently and silently, as rest deepens in the background. Here, there is an invitation to notice the quiet possibility that nothing is missing in this moment, not as a belief to adopt, and not as a statement to prove, but simply as a temporary condition that can be sensed rather than analyzed. The body is already here. The surface beneath you is already doing its work. Breathing is already happening without assistance. Being enough right now does not require improvement, readiness, or completion. It does not depend on how the day went, what was accomplished, or what remains unfinished. It does not ask for confidence or positivity. It exists independently of mood, energy, or clarity. Often, the sense of not being enough comes from an unconscious leaning toward the next moment, the next task, or the next version of oneself. In rest, that leaning can soften. There is nowhere else to arrive, no later version that needs to be prepared for. For now, this moment stands on its own. You may notice that when nothing is being demanded, the body naturally settles into a quieter rhythm. Muscles no longer hold themselves in readiness. The nervous system no longer scans for what must be corrected. This settling is not something you have to initiate. It happens when pressure is absent. Being enough right now does not mean that growth stops or that change is denied. It simply means that rest does not require earning. Sleep does not wait for permission. The system does not need to justify why it deserves to recover. If thoughts arise that question this, small reminders of expectations, comparisons, or unfinished obligations, they do not need to be argued with. They can be allowed to pass without engagement. The sense of sufficiency does not need defense. It is not fragile. It remains available even when doubted. Sometimes this sense shows up as a subtle neutrality, not excitement, not relief, but a quiet absence of urgency. A feeling that nothing is wrong enough to require immediate attention. That neutrality is often overlooked, but it is a stable and restful state. You might notice that when the idea of being enough right now is allowed, even briefly, there is less internal movement, less checking, less self-reference. The mind does not have to measure itself against anything. It can simply drift. This is not about convincing yourself that everything is perfect. It is about recognizing that perfection is not a requirement for rest. The body does not wait for perfect conditions to sleep. It sleeps when conditions are safe enough, quiet enough, and non-demanding. Safety does not come from achievement. It comes from the absence of threat. And in this moment, there is no immediate threat asking for action. Nothing here needs to be fixed to allow rest to continue. If emotions surface alongside this tenderness, doubt, or a softening into vulnerability, They can be included without interpretation. Being enough right now includes those states as well. They do not disqualify rest. They often signal that the system is lowering its guard. There may be a gentle sense of permission unfolding, permission to stop trying, permission to pause self-assessment, permission to exist without commentary. This permission does not need to be maintained consciously. Once noticed, it can fade into the background and continue on its own, even if the mind returns to familiar patterns later. That is not a failure. The experience of being enough does not need to be continuous to be effective. Brief moments are sufficient. The nervous system remembers them. As this sense settles, attention may become less centered on the idea itself and more diffuse. That is natural. The understanding does not need to stay in focus. It can dissolve into a general feeling of ease. Nothing more is required here. No affirmation needs repeating. No conclusion needs to be drawn. The body and mind are already doing what they know how to do when pressure is absent. Being enough right now is not something to hold on to. It can remain quietly present without effort, supporting rest as awareness gradually softens, and the system continues its gentle descent into sleep. Here, attention may begin to notice a quality of safety that does not come from effort, reassurance, or control. It is not something that needs to be created or imagined. It exists quietly as an underlying condition, already present, already functioning, whether it has been noticed before or not. Safety, in this sense, is not an emotion and not a thought. It is an atmosphere, a background state that allows the system to stop bracing. When it is present, even subtly, there is less need to scan, prepare, or anticipate. The body does not need instructions to recognize it. It responds automatically. You may notice that when safety is present, there is a gentle lowering of internal volume. Muscles do not hold themselves quite as tightly. Breathing becomes less noticeable. The mind becomes less interested in tracking what comes next. None of this needs to be encouraged. It unfolds naturally when vigilance is no longer required. This sense of safety does not depend on certainty. It does not require knowing what tomorrow will bring or resolving anything from the past. It is not fragile, and it does not disappear when thoughts arise. It remains available even when the mind wanders, even when awareness drifts. Often, the nervous system has learned to stay alert out of habit rather than necessity. In moments like this, it can relearn something quieter, that nothing is being asked of it right now. No response is required. No defense is needed. The present moment is neutral, stable, and non-demanding. You might sense this safety as a soft boundary around experience. Thoughts can move within it without urgency. Sensations can come and go without meaning. Emotions can pass through without attaching themselves. Everything is allowed, and nothing needs immediate attention. There is no need to search for a specific sensation to confirm that safety is here. It does not always announce itself clearly. Sometimes it shows up as a lack of tension, a lack of resistance, or simply a lack of concern about what is happening internally. If the mind checks for danger or tries to evaluate whether it is truly safe, that checking can be included as part of the atmosphere. It does not disrupt it. Even the act of checking can soften when it realizes there is nothing to respond to. Safety here is not conditional. It does not require a particular posture, thought, or state of mind. It is present even if rest feels shallow, even if sleep has been difficult before. It is not a promise about the future. It is a recognition of the present. As this inner atmosphere becomes more familiar, awareness may feel less pointed and more diffuse. Attention does not need to hold the center. It can spread out, becoming less specific, less concerned with detail. This diffusion is a natural sign that the system is moving toward rest. You might notice moments where the body feels heavier, or moments where it feels almost absent. Both are normal. Safety allows sensation to change without needing explanation. There is no correct way for this to feel. If external sounds are present, they do not threaten this state. They can exist within it, distant and unimportant. If thoughts pass through, they do not disturb it. They move like weather across a stable landscape. This quiet safety does not need to be maintained consciously. Once recognized, even faintly, it continues on its own. The nervous system knows how to remain in it without supervision. Awareness does not need to stay awake to protect it. There is nothing to hold here, nothing to deepen, nothing to check. Safety is already doing its work in the background, allowing rest to continue, allowing the body and mind to soften further. And as this atmosphere remains gentle and neutral, the system naturally prepares for deeper rest, not by moving towards sleep deliberately, but by no longer resisting it. Everything needed for this moment is already present. Safety remains quiet, steady, and unobtrusive, supporting the ongoing descent into sleep without requiring awareness to stay involved. Here, the focus shifts gently toward the soft release of inner commentary, not by stopping it and not by correcting it, but by allowing it to lose its relevance. The mind may still generate observations, judgments, or quiet evaluations, but they no longer need to be followed. Inner commentary often continues simply because it has been listened to for so long. When attention stops leaning toward it, the commentary begins to fade into the background on its own. Words may arise, but they no longer organize experience. They no longer define what is happening. There is no need to silence the inner voice. Trying to quiet it would only give it importance. Instead, it can be allowed to speak without being answered, without agreement, without resistance. Like a radio playing softly in another room, present but no longer central. Judgment often shows up as small assessments. How the body feels, how rest is going, whether sleep is approaching fast enough, whether this moment is working. These assessments do not need to be corrected. They can simply be noticed as unnecessary. Nothing here requires evaluation. As evaluation loses momentum, a natural quiet begins to emerge. Not an empty silence, but a spacious one, a silence that includes sensation, includes sound, includes thought fragments, without turning any of them into problems to solve. You may notice that without commentary, experience feels less personal. Sensations occur without being claimed. Thoughts pass without being believed. Emotions move without being interpreted. This impersonal quality is deeply restful. It reduces effort without requiring intention. Self-judgment often arises from the idea that something should be different. In rest, that idea can loosen. There is no target state to reach, no benchmark for success. The system is allowed to be exactly as it is, without being measured. If judgments about the self appear, about productivity, worth, progress, or readiness, they do not need to be replaced with positive statements. They can be allowed to drift away simply because they are not needed right now. Rest does not ask for self-improvement. You might sense a subtle relief as commentary quiets, a feeling of stepping out of a conversation that no longer needs to be continued. This relief does not require awareness to stay with it. It can unfold on its own, gently and gradually. As inner commentary softens, gaps between thoughts may grow longer, or thoughts may become less complete, less structured. Sentences may trail off. Ideas may dissolve before finishing. This is not something to notice closely. It is something to let happen, even if commentary returns intermittently. That is fine. Each return carries less force when it is not engaged. Over time, the system learns that silence is safe, that nothing bad happens when evaluation stops. There is no risk in letting go of self-judgment here. Awareness remains present enough to allow rest. The body remains protected. The environment remains unchanged. Nothing requires monitoring. In this quieting, attention may feel less centered behind the eyes and more spread throughout the body. Or it may feel less located anywhere at all. These shifts are natural and do not need interpretation. The absence of inner commentary creates space. In that space, the nervous system continues to settle. Muscles soften without instruction. Breathing remains unforced. Awareness becomes less sharp, more diffuse. Nothing needs to replace the commentary. Silence does not need to be filled. Neutral presence is enough. Sound, sensation, and quiet coexist without hierarchy. There is nothing to hold onto here, no technique to maintain. The release of inner judgment can continue quietly, even if awareness drifts, even if sleep approaches without being noticed. The system knows how to rest when it is no longer being evaluated. That knowing does not need attention. It operates beneath awareness, steady and automatic, as rest continues to deepen on its own. Here, attention can rest on a quiet confidence that does not come from effort or belief. It is not something that needs to be generated or reinforced. It exists as a natural trust in processes that have been functioning long before this moment began. The body knows how to rest. The nervous system knows how to reset. Sleep does not need to be managed. Trusting rest does not require watching it happen. It does not require checking progress or noticing signs. In fact, rest often deepens most easily when it is allowed to operate outside of awareness. The system works best when it is not being supervised. You may notice that throughout the day, much of the body's intelligence functions automatically. The heart beats without instruction. Digestion continues without attention. Healing and regulation unfold quietly in the background. Rest belongs to the same category. It does not require guidance to do its work. Sometimes there is an impulse to stay alert, to ensure that sleep arrives, or to make sure that relaxation is happening correctly. That impulse can soften here. Nothing needs to be monitored. There is no task to complete. The system does not need encouragement to enter recovery mode. Trust shows up not as certainty, but as a lack of interference, a willingness to let go of control, a quiet stepping aside. When interference fades, the body naturally returns to balance in its own way, at its own pace. You might sense this trust as a gentle settling, a feeling that you do not have to participate in the process anymore. Or you might not notice it at all. Both are fine. Rest does not require awareness to confirm it. If thoughts arise that wonder whether rest is enough, whether sleep will come soon enough, or whether tomorrow will feel better, those thoughts do not need to be resolved. They can pass without response. Trust does not argue. It allows. The intelligence of rest is adaptive. It responds to what the body needs most without needing to be told. Sometimes that means deeper sleep. Sometimes it means lighter rest. Sometimes it means quiet wakefulness that still restores. All of these are forms of recovery. You do not need to decide which one should happen. The system already knows. Letting it choose is part of trusting rest to do its work. As this trust settles, effort naturally decreases. Muscles release what they no longer need to hold. The mind loses interest in planning or reviewing. Awareness becomes less focused, less directional. There is nothing fragile about this process. It continues even if attention drifts. It continues even if sleep arrives gradually or unexpectedly. It continues even if awareness fades without noticing the moment it happens. Rest does not depend on perfect conditions. It adapts to what is available. Noise, silence, thoughts, or quiet all coexist within it. None of them stop the system from restoring itself. You might notice moments of heaviness or moments of lightness, moments where time feels unclear, moments where thoughts lose coherence. These are natural signs that the system is disengaging from effort. They do not need interpretation. Trusting rest also means trusting that nothing important will be missed by letting go. body remains safe. Awareness returns when needed. For now, there is no need for readiness, even if the mind has learned to stay alert in the past. It can learn something new here, that it is safe to release control, that nothing bad happens when monitoring stops, that recovery does not require vigilance. This trust does not need to be maintained consciously. Once allowed, it becomes part of the background. Awareness does not need to stay present to support it. There is nothing to do next, no transition to manage, no moment to wait for. Rest continues quietly, guided by the body's automatic intelligence, carrying you gently forward as awareness softens and sleep approaches in its own time. Here, experience may begin to settle into a state that is neither emotionally charged nor empty. Not excitement, not sadness, not even relief in a dramatic sense. Instead, a calm neutrality that feels stable, unremarkable, and quietly supportive. This neutrality is not something to achieve. It often appears when nothing is being pushed away and nothing is being pulled closer. Emotional neutrality does not mean numbness. Sensation is still present. Awareness is still here. But there is less pull, less reaction, less commentary about what should or should not be happening. Feelings lose their urgency. They no longer ask for interpretation or response. As neutrality settles, it may gently transform into comfort, not the kind of comfort that announces itself, but the kind that feels like nothing being wrong, like not needing to adjust, fix, or brace. The body recognizes this state quickly. Muscles soften further. The nervous system settles deeper. Comfort here is quiet. It does not excite the mind or stimulate thought. It does not require reassurance. It simply exists as an absence of friction, a sense that experience is smooth, uninterrupted, and safe enough to rest within. You may notice that when comfort is present, attention naturally widens. It no longer needs to stay focused on internal states. Awareness becomes less interested in detail. It drifts, floats, spreads out. This is not something to guide. It happens when neutrality removes pressure. If small emotional waves pass through, faint memories, soft feelings, traces of the day, they can move without leaving residue. Neutrality allows emotions to pass without sticking. Comfort allows them to dissolve without effort. There is no requirement to feel positive. There is no benefit in trying to create pleasant sensations. The comfort that supports sleep is understated. It feels ordinary, even boring to the thinking mind. That ordinariness is what makes it effective. Sometimes the mind has learned to associate calm with something being missing. Here, calm simply means that nothing is needed. The system is not deprived. It is complete enough to rest. You might notice that this comfort feels different from distraction or dissociation. There is still presence, still a sense of being here, but there is less ownership of experience. Sensations occur without demand. Thoughts may appear without narrative. Awareness does not cling as neutrality turns into comfort. Effort continues to decrease. The body stops holding itself upright internally. There is less sense of doing, even mentally. Less sense of maintaining awareness, more allowance for drifting. This comfort does not need to deepen to be effective. Even a faint sense of it is enough. The nervous system responds to subtle signals. It does not need intensity. If attention briefly returns to check how things are going, it can notice that nothing needs changing. That recognition alone allows attention to release again. Checking becomes unnecessary when there is nothing to manage. Comfort also supports a sense of continuity. Experience flows without sharp edges. Time feels less segmented. Moments blend together. This blending is not confusion. It is a sign that the mind is loosening its grip on structure. There is no instruction here to remain neutral. Neutrality stays naturally when it is not disturbed by effort. Comfort continues when it is not evaluated. Both exist best when they are left alone. Even if awareness fades in and out, comfort remains in the background. It does not depend on conscious attention. It supports rest even when the voice is heard without listening. Nothing more is required. No insight needs to be drawn from this state. No meaning needs to be assigned. Emotional neutrality turning into comfort is simply a natural phase of letting go. And as this quiet comfort remains, the system continues its gradual descent, unhurried and unobserved, toward deeper rest, where awareness can soften further and sleep can arrive without being noticed. Here, awareness may begin to lose its usual sharpness, not suddenly and not completely, but gently, as if the edges of experience are becoming softer and less defined. This is not something to encourage or prevent. It happens naturally when attention no longer needs to stay precise. Clarity gives way to spaciousness. Details matter less. Boundaries between sensations, thoughts, and sounds begin to blur. Experience feels wider, but less focused, like looking at a landscape without trying to name anything in it. In this state, awareness does not need a center. It does not have to sit behind the eyes or attach itself to any particular sensation. It can feel spread out, diffuse, or even difficult to locate. This is a normal and supportive shift as the system prepares for sleep. You might notice that sounds feel farther away, even if they are still present. Sensations in the body may feel muted or indistinct. Thoughts may arise as fragments rather than full sentences. None of this requires attention. It is simply how awareness behaves when it no longer needs to stay alert. Spaciousness does not mean emptiness. There is still experience, but it unfolds without emphasis. Nothing stands out strongly enough to pull attention back into effort. Awareness floats rather than grips. If there is a sense of drifting, it does not need to be followed. If there is a sense of stillness, it does not need to be held. Awareness can move freely between these qualities without direction. Sometimes, this vagueness feels unfamiliar at first. The mind may briefly notice the lack of clarity and wonder what is happening. That noticing does not interfere. It fades quickly when nothing responds to it. This spacious awareness allows the nervous system to disengage further from monitoring. There is less need to check posture, breathing, or mental state. The body continues to regulate itself without input. You may find that time feels different here. Moments stretch or compress. Sequence loses importance. The sense of before and after becomes less relevant. This change does not need explanation. It is simply part of the descent into sleep. Thoughts, if they appear, may feel distant or incomplete. They may dissolve before forming meaning. There is no need to follow them to their end. They fade naturally when attention does not attach. Awareness may occasionally sharpen again for a moment, then soften once more. This fluctuation is normal. There is no need to stabilize it. Each softening supports deeper rest. Spaciousness also allows the body to feel less solid. Heaviness and lightness may alternate. The sense of having a clear outline may come and go. These sensations are signs that perception is loosening its grip. Nothing is required of awareness here. It does not need to stay present. It does not need to disappear. Whatever happens is acceptable. The system knows how to continue without guidance. As clarity continues to fade, effort continues to drop away. The last traces of intentional attention begin to dissolve. Awareness becomes more like a background hum than an active process. There is no moment to wait for, no threshold to cross deliberately. Spaciousness itself carries the system forward, gently and without direction. Even if awareness briefly notices this drifting quality, it does not need to respond. Recognition fades on its own when nothing follows it. This vagueness is not a problem. It is a sign that the mind is letting go of structure. That letting go does not need to be completed consciously. Here, awareness can remain soft, unfocused, and spacious. Or it can fade entirely without being noticed. Either way, rest continues to deepen naturally, without effort, without instruction, and without awareness needing to stay involved. Here, the sense of time may begin to loosen its usual structure. Minutes no longer feel distinct. The idea of sequence, what came before, what comes next, starts to blur. Experience is no longer organized into clear segments. It simply unfolds without needing to be tracked. This change does not mean anything unusual is happening. It is a natural shift that occurs when the mind stops measuring. Time is often held in place by attention, by memory, by anticipation. When those soften, time loses its edges. You might notice that it becomes difficult to tell how long you have been resting. A few moments could feel long, or a long stretch could feel like almost nothing. This is not confusion. It is the absence of timekeeping. The system no longer needs to orient itself. There is no need to check the clock internally. No need to estimate progress. rest does not move forward in steps. It deepens when time stops being relevant. In this state, moments begin to merge. One sensation flows into the next without clear separation. A thought fragment may dissolve before it feels like it belongs to a particular moment. Sound may appear and fade without marking time. The mind often uses time as a way to stay engaged. When time loses structure, engagement naturally decreases. There is less reason to stay alert, less reason to hold awareness in place. You may notice that the sense of now feels wider and less defined. Instead of a precise instant, there is a gentle span. Experience exists within it without needing to be ordered. If awareness briefly tries to reassemble time, wondering how long this has been happening, or how long until sleep, that impulse can soften quickly. There is nothing to calculate, nothing to prepare for. When time loses importance, effort falls away with it. The body no longer anticipates the next shift. The mind no longer waits for a particular moment. Everything becomes less urgent, less directional. This timelessness can feel subtle. It may show up simply as forgetting to wonder about time at all. That forgetting is enough. It allows the system to continue disengaging from structure. Even if a clear sense of time returns briefly, it does not interrupt the process. Structure can appear and dissolve again without consequence. Rest does not depend on continuity. In this blending of moments, awareness becomes less invested in memory. The past does not press forward. The future does not pull attention ahead. Experience is free to remain where it is, without reference. This state supports deeper rest because the nervous system no longer needs to orient itself in duration. It can settle fully into the present without marking it. There is nothing to hold onto here. No moment needs to be remembered. No transition needs to be noticed. Time can continue to soften quietly in the background. As structure fades, awareness may feel lighter, less anchored, or it may feel heavier, more diffuse. Both are natural. Neither requires interpretation. Rest continues, whether time is noticed or forgotten. The body does not rely on clocks to recover. The mind does not need schedules to sleep. Here, time can remain undefined. Moments can overlap. Experience can drift without destination. There is no need to return to structure, and as time continues to lose its shape, the system moves effortlessly toward deeper rest, carried not by minutes or hours, but by the natural rhythm of letting go. Here, thoughts may begin to appear only partially formed. A phrase might start without finishing. An image may arise without context. An idea may surface and fade before it becomes clear what it was about. This is not a problem to correct. It is a natural sign that the mind is no longer organizing itself around coherence. In waking life, thoughts usually move toward completion. They connect, explain, and resolve. As rest deepens, that tendency loosens. the mind no longer feels the need to carry ideas from beginning to end. Completion becomes unnecessary. You might notice a sentence starting and then simply stopping, or a memory beginning to surface and then dissolving before it takes shape. These interruptions do not require attention. They are not gaps to be filled. They are spaces opening naturally. This dissolving does not mean thoughts are being pushed away. They are simply losing momentum. Without attention holding them together, they soften and disperse on their own, like mist thinning as the air warms. There is no need to follow these fragments to see where they were going. They do not have destinations. They are not messages to decode. Letting them fade unfinished is part of how the mind releases effort. As thought fragments dissolve, awareness does not need to replace them with anything else. Silence does not need content. Neutral presence is enough to support this process. You may notice that when thoughts lose structure, there is less sense of you thinking them. They feel less personal, less owned. They arise and disappear without leaving a trace. This impersonal quality is deeply restful. Sometimes the mind briefly tries to complete a fragment out of habit. That impulse can fade quickly when it is not acted on. Nothing is lost by letting ideas remain unfinished. In this state, meaning becomes optional. Words may appear without significance. Images may flicker without narrative. Experience no longer needs to make sense in order to continue. This is not confusion. It is the absence of organizing pressure. The mind is allowed to rest from producing clarity. Clarity is no longer required. As fragments dissolve midstream, gaps between them may widen, or they may overlap lightly without forming sequences. Both are signs that the mind is disengaging from effort. There is no need to observe these changes closely. Observation itself can soften. Awareness does not need to stay sharp to allow this process to continue. If a complete thought does arise, it can pass without being followed. If only fragments appear, they can fade without concern. Nothing here needs to be managed. This dissolving of thought supports the body's movement toward sleep. When the mind stops finishing, the system stops striving. Energy is conserved. Recovery deepens, even if awareness notices the absence of clear thoughts. That noticing does not need to continue. Recognition fades naturally when there is nothing to respond to. There is no requirement to reach a blank state. Some fragments may still appear, some may not. Both are fine. Rest does not depend on silence. Here, the mind is learning that it does not need to carry experience forward. It can let go mid-sentence, mid-image, mid-idea. Nothing bad happens when it does. And as thoughts continue to dissolve before completion, awareness becomes freer to drift. The system no longer waits for conclusions. It settles naturally into the unfinished, where sleep can arrive quietly, without being announced, and without needing to be noticed at all. Here, experience may hover in a place that feels neither fully awake nor fully asleep. A gentle in-between where awareness is present, but no longer sharp, and rest is deepening without a clear boundary. This edge does not need to be crossed deliberately. It is not a doorway that requires a step forward. It is a space that allows itself. At this edge, effort has mostly dissolved. The mind is no longer trying to fall asleep, and it is no longer invested in staying awake. It simply rests where it is, without preference. This lack of preference is what allows the transition to happen naturally. You might notice moments where awareness fades slightly, then returns softly, then fades again. These fluctuations are normal. They are not interruptions. They are signs that the system is disengaging in layers, rather than all at once. Thoughts here may feel dreamlike, even if sleep has not fully arrived. Images may appear without logic. Sensations may feel distant or oddly neutral. There is no need to understand or follow any of it. Meaning is no longer required. This edge often feels gentle and unremarkable. There may be no clear signal that anything important is happening. That is intentional. Sleep approaches most easily when it is not announced. The mind does not need to decide when to let go. The body does not need permission. The nervous system recognizes this state and knows how to continue on its own. If awareness briefly wonders whether sleep is coming, that wondering can dissolve quickly. There is no benefit in answering it. The question itself fades when nothing responds. Here, time may feel especially unclear. Moments blend into one another. The sense of sequence weakens further. Experience exists without needing a timeline. You may notice that the body feels less solid, or that sensation becomes patchy, vague, or distant. These changes do not need to be monitored. They happen when perception loosens its grip. At this edge, attention no longer needs to stay engaged with the voice. Words can be heard without being listened to, or they may drift past without registering at all. Both are signs that awareness is no longer central. There is no risk in hovering here. Nothing is being delayed. Nothing is being missed. This state is not something to stay in or move through. It is simply part of the natural descent. Sometimes sleep arrives from this edge without awareness noticing the moment it happens. Other times, awareness lingers briefly, then fades quietly. There is no correct way for this transition to occur. The system does not need guidance here. It has done this countless times before. Even if sleep has been difficult in the past, this moment stands on its own. If awareness softens into absence, that is fine. If it remains faintly present, that is also fine. Both allow rest to deepen. There is nothing to manage, nothing to encourage, nothing to prevent. The edge between waking and sleep holds itself effortlessly. Here, awareness can hover without effort, without expectation, without direction. And when it is ready, it will fade naturally, allowing sleep to take over quietly, gently, and without needing to be noticed. Here, sleepiness may begin to spread through the system in a way that feels gradual and unforced, not as a sudden drop and not as something to move toward, but as a natural diffusion, a soft heaviness that does not demand attention, a drifting quality that does not need explanation. This sleepiness is not something you create. It arrives when effort has stepped aside. It spreads when nothing resists it. The body recognizes the conditions and responds automatically. You might notice that limbs feel heavier, or that the sense of having a clear body outline becomes less distinct, or there may simply be a feeling of sinking, not physically, but perceptually. These sensations do not need to be tracked. They do not signal progress. They are just part of the system letting go. Sleepiness often feels different each time. Sometimes it is heavy. Sometimes it is light and floaty. Sometimes it is barely noticeable, felt only as a lack of interest in staying awake. All of these are valid expressions of the same process. As this heaviness spreads, awareness naturally becomes less anchored. Attention no longer stays in one place. It drifts without intention. There is less effort to notice, less motivation to remain clear. You may notice that sounds feel muffled or distant, even if they are still present. Sensations fade into the background. Thoughts, if they arise, feel slow or incomplete. None of this requires attention. Sleepiness does not need encouragement. It does not deepen faster when it is noticed. In fact, it often settles most completely when it is allowed to operate outside awareness. There is no need to check whether sleep is close. No need to estimate how far along you are. The system does not move through stages in a way that needs tracking. It flows naturally when not interrupted. You might notice moments where awareness dips, then returns faintly, then dips again. These gentle waves are signs that sleepiness is spreading unevenly, layer by layer. This is normal. It does not need correction. As sleepiness grows, the sense of agency continues to fade. There is less feeling of choosing or doing. Experience happens without direction. Awareness becomes passive rather than active. The body no longer needs to hold itself upright internally. Muscles release further. Breathing continues quietly on its own. There is no sense of managing posture or sensation. If there is a brief impulse to stay awake, to listen closely, or to follow the voice, that impulse can soften quickly. There is nothing to stay alert for. Nothing is required. Sleepiness also affects the sense of time. Moments blur further. The idea of duration loses relevance. Experience stretches or compresses without meaning. There is no danger in allowing this heaviness to spread. The body remains safe. Awareness returns when needed. For now, it is free to fade. You do not need to help sleepiness along. You do not need to surrender to it deliberately. It does not need permission. It arrives because conditions are right. As this quality continues to expand, awareness may feel increasingly distant, as if observing from far away. or not observing at all. Either way is fine. Observation is no longer required. Here, sleepiness can continue to spread quietly, steadily, without announcement. Awareness does not need to stay present to witness it. The system knows what to do next, and as heaviness and drifting increase naturally, the boundary between awareness and sleep softens further, allowing rest to deepen in its own time, without effort, without direction, and without being noticed. Here, the impulse to monitor what is happening can begin to dissolve. The quiet habit of checking, am I relaxed enough? Am I asleep yet? Is this working? Loses its purpose. Monitoring fades not because it is stopped, but because it is no longer needed. The mind has spent much of its time staying oriented, observing, evaluating, keeping track. In deeper rest, that function naturally powers down. There is nothing left to supervise. Nothing requires feedback. Nothing needs confirmation. You may notice moments where awareness starts to step back from experience. Sensations continue, but there is less interest in them. Sounds may still arrive, but they no longer pull attention. Thoughts may pass through, but they are not followed. This withdrawal of monitoring happens quietly and without instruction. When the mind stops checking, experience becomes smoother. There are fewer interruptions, fewer returns to clarity. The system moves forward without needing to report on itself. If a brief moment of monitoring returns, perhaps a sudden noticing of the voice, or a thought about sleep, it does not disrupt anything. It can dissolve again just as easily. Each return carries less force when it is not reinforced. Monitoring often stays active because it believes it is keeping things safe. Here, safety is already present. Nothing changes when monitoring relaxes. The body remains supported. Awareness returns when needed. There is no risk in letting go. As this habit releases, awareness may feel less centered. There may be a sense of drifting without an observer, or a sense that experience is happening without anyone watching closely. This is not disorientation. It is a natural shift away from self-reference. The mind does not need to know what stage it is in. It does not need to identify whether sleep is light or deep. It does not need to recognize transitions. Those processes continue on their own. You might notice that moments seem to pass without being registered, or that awareness fades and returns without memory of where it went. These gaps are not something to examine. They are signs that monitoring has already loosened. As checking disappears, effort disappears with it. The last subtle tension of paying attention dissolves. Awareness becomes passive, unforced, and optional. The voice can continue without being listened to. Words may be heard as sound only, or not at all. Meaning no longer needs to be extracted. Monitoring language is no longer necessary. There is no instruction to stop noticing. Noticing simply becomes less interesting. The system chooses rest over observation automatically when nothing requires oversight. If awareness lingers faintly, that is fine. If it fades completely, that is also fine. Both are supported by the absence of monitoring. Nothing needs to be remembered from this point. Nothing needs to be carried forward. Experience does not need to be stitched together. Here, the mind is free to rest from watching itself, free to let experience unfold without commentary, without measurement, without report. As monitoring continues to release, rest stabilizes. Sleep deepens, whether awareness is present or not. The system continues forward smoothly, quietly, and without requiring any involvement. There is nothing more to check, nothing more to notice. Monitoring can remain absent as the body and mind settle fully into sleep, supported by their own natural rhythms, without effort and without awareness needing to stay involved. Here, rest can continue to deepen without needing awareness to participate. Sleep does not require attention in order to remain stable. Even if sounds are faintly heard or the voice continues in the background, the system can stay fully at rest. This is a state where sleep holds itself. The body no longer needs cues. The nervous system no longer needs reassurance. Recovery proceeds automatically beneath awareness, without supervision. You might notice that awareness seems distant or absent entirely. Or you might briefly surface into a light noticing before drifting again. These movements do not interrupt rest. They are part of how sleep maintains itself. Rest does not reset each time awareness flickers. It continues uninterrupted. The system does not start over. It simply keeps going, quietly and efficiently. Even when the voice is heard without listening, sleep can remain deep. Words lose their meaning. Sound becomes texture. Nothing asks for response. There is no need to protect this state. It is not fragile. Sleep is resilient. It absorbs small disturbances without losing depth. If awareness briefly returns, it may feel hazy or vague. There is no need to orient, no need to remember where you are, no need to follow anything. Awareness can fade again naturally. This deepening rest does not depend on silence. It does not depend on darkness. It does not depend on stillness. The body knows how to rest under many conditions. At this depth, the sense of self is minimal or absent. Experience continues without reference. The system is focused on restoration, not observation. Breathing continues in its own rhythm. Muscles remain released. Internal processes continue their quiet work. Nothing requires guidance. Time no longer matters here. Minutes and hours are irrelevant. Sleep unfolds according to internal rhythms, not external markers. There is nothing to notice, and nothing is lost by not noticing. Rest does not need witnesses. If the mind surfaces briefly with a thought or image, it dissolves quickly. It does not re-engage the system. Sleep holds steady. This is the kind of rest that continues even when awareness is absent. The kind that does not require memory. The kind that repairs quietly. There is no expectation that awareness should stay gone. If it returns, it can fade again. If it does not, rest still continues. Nothing needs to be done to remain asleep. Nothing needs to be avoided. The system maintains balance on its own. Here, deep rest can continue indefinitely, uninterrupted by the presence or absence of awareness. Sleep is stable, self-sustaining, and sufficient. The body remains supported. The environment remains unchanged. Recovery continues, and without needing attention, without needing confirmation, rest deepens and sustains itself naturally, carrying the system forward through the night in quiet, neutral sleep. Here, sleep can remain exactly as it is, safe, neutral, and uninterrupted, without moving toward an ending. There is no final moment to arrive at, no signal that anything has completed. Rest simply continues, steady and unremarkable, doing its work without awareness needing to participate. This state does not need maintenance. It does not need reinforcement. Sleep holds itself naturally, supported by rhythms that do not require attention or guidance. The body remains settled. The nervous system remains calm. Nothing changes that needs noticing. Awareness may be absent for long stretches, or it may flicker lightly from time to time. Neither alters the quality of rest. Sleep does not depend on continuity of consciousness. It remains intact even when awareness comes and goes. There is no expectation that anything should happen next. No progression to follow. No depth to reach. The system is already where it needs to be. Sounds, if present, remain distant and irrelevant. Words may continue in the background without meaning. Silence and sound coexist without importance. None of it pulls awareness back into effort. Time no longer organizes experience. Minutes and hours pass without being marked. Sleep unfolds according to internal timing alone, unconcerned with structure. The sense of self remains minimal or absent. Experience continues without reference, without evaluation, without ownership. The system is focused on restoration, not observation. There is no need to protect this state. It is resilient. Small disturbances are absorbed without effect. Sleep continues smoothly. If awareness briefly surfaces, it can fade again without response. Nothing is required to re-enter rest. The body remembers how. Nothing needs to be remembered from this point. Nothing needs to be carried forward. Experience does not need to be stitched into a narrative. This state is designed to repeat itself quietly. Looping does not restart anything. It simply continues. Each moment is the same as the last, neutral, safe, and sufficient. There is no closing cue here, no suggestion of waking, no transition to follow. Sleep remains open-ended. The system stays supported. Recovery continues. Rest deepens or lightens as needed, without instruction. And as this continues, there is nothing
you.